Hello, welcome back to Expo Scale Factor. Today I have the pleasure of having Gérard Hoffmann, CEO for Luxembourg at Proximus and Managing Director of Clarence, the first disconnected sovereign cloud in Europe, and one of his many brainchildren. Gérard, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jerome, for receiving me here.
A pleasure, a pleasure. As a starter, I know how deeply you care about Luxembourg's tech ecosystem and how instrumental you've been behind many critical initiatives like the launch of the Digital Tech Fund, bringing Google to Luxembourg. Gérard, what is driving this specific interest of yours?
Well, Jerome, this has to do with the early years of my professional career. I started my career back in the early 90s in Silicon Valley, and I actually worked for two different startups.
Very good.
The first one was actually one that was started by a Luxembourger who had spent his entire career in the Valley, and where I was active during my studies at Stanford University. And the second one was a larger startup that had been started by my PhD advisor, for which I worked for roughly 2 years before coming back to Luxembourg. And ever since, I've been interested in the startup ecosystem.
Okay, wow. So, I mean, you've been hands-on clearly on this subject, so I understand now much better why it is that you're keen on supporting this source of energy for the country. Now, can you tell us about your and Proximus's involvement and role in the Luxembourg startup ecosystem? From what we've seen over the last decade alone, I mean, you've been really one of the most active and committed corporates. You've been a backer, an important investor in the Digital Tech Fund, right? Since the beginning. So I would like to understand why and why you think it's important for the country and our ecosystem.
Well, when I came back to Luxembourg after my experience in the United States, there was no startup ecosystem, and I thought that it was a big, issue for a country that needed to develop its industry, its ecosystem in the future, and especially, well, later on when I saw different things in my career, I found that innovation happened not so much inside the corporates, inside the existing organization, but very much outside, in startups. And I thought that I should invest myself and bring in my experience and passion for the startup industry to try to develop that ecosystem.
In a way, that American spirits of, like, let's say, making things happen, right? Really, because there wasn't much. I mean, I was active way back when. I was also for 20 years in this ecosystem, and it was emerging for the longest time until the Digital Tech Fund really came about, and really you could see a much bigger number of companies arise. Now, Gérard, may I ask you if you could share a little bit of stories maybe or examples of collaboration you have with startups, because I know that you're actually sourcing and providing your customers with a lot of very innovative solutions. And so I understand they are coming maybe from your group, but they're also coming from outside your group. So what can you share about that?
Well, indeed, at Proximus, we serve as a channel for many technologies, and of course, we do distribute and serve our clients with technologies from large vendors, but now and then we also insert innovative technologies from startup companies. Perhaps two examples here I can cite. We recently launched a partnership with Hangfang Labs, a French cybersecurity company that has a very innovative service that they offer, and we act as their partner for Luxembourg. Another company from Switzerland this time that was funded some 10 years ago called WeCan. It has a solution for the distribution of KYC information between financial institutions. But we also collaborate with startups in different other ways. Let me take as an example Nextgate Tech, which is part of the portfolio at DTF, where we have provided the hosting solution together with Google for them in their early stages.
Very good. Yeah, excellent. It was, I think, instrumental support that you were there and make that a possibility, because obviously a lot of the startups operating in the country that are cloud companies, they need a cloud solution, right? To rely on and to offer their solution. So without that,
exactly,
what would they do? Would be a hard thing, especially in the financial services sector, where you probably need a local cloud offering on the back of all the big cloud providers. Now, what would be maybe interesting for the founders listening to us today is, what do you think makes a collaboration like that successful? What are the key ingredients? Because it's not because you have a wonderful solution that you can bring into enterprise customers and you're going to be, winning each and every time, and it's going to be all sunshine and rainbow. And most often, it's not the case, and you're, as a startupper, you discover a completely different world with different types of requirements.
Indeed, the corporate world is not that easy to handle often, and as a company that serves many corporates, we have the experience of handling them, and we can bring that to the startup. So we act as a translator sometimes for the startups. They can address the corporates with our help through us, and we add in our own services, obviously, into the global solution. So in a way, that makes us kind of an incubator for some of these startups. But obviously, the core component is always the match between the solution that the startup has developed and the needs of our customers.
Of course. But that translation, I think, is indeed very very important,
yes,
for the founders out there. Now, there's a subject that we've come across several times in a portfolio with a number of companies that are active in Europe, of course, but also in North America. And we see that the sales cycle time are very different. So sales cycles in Europe with enterprise customers would typically be between a year to 2 years very often, so extremely long sales cycle to adopt these new AI cloud technologies. And with their US customers, the timeline is much shorter. We're talking about 3 to 6 months. So really crazy, and actually translates into what people may have seen, which is the growing productivity gap between the US and Europe in the last 10 years. So, and we're talking about a massive productivity gap over time. So how could, with this AI wave that we're seeing here, we're seeing everybody talk about AI, but in the trenches and seeing, the order book of our companies with European customers, we see the take-up is actually very slow. So what, in your opinion, could unleash, what are the obstacles to the adoption, a much more accelerated adoption of these technologies by enterprise customers?
Well, this is a very complicated question. You address basically the lack of agility of European organizations, corporates, and also public procurement, etc., to address innovation. It's productivity comes through innovation. We don't have the same mindset in Europe. You gave the example of productivity. I give an example, that we see happening now. Europe is losing its edge in the car industry to China. Why? Because innovation, again, is the issue. And here we do need to think about the incentives that we give for the innovators. Of course, inside and outside the corporates. Inside the corporates, it's about creating the necessary management structures and governance to drive innovation. And outside, there's two things. There is we need to foster a startup ecosystem that is a lot more proactive and strong, there's still 1/3 of the European startups that go to United States, and it's often the best ones for funding. So we need to work on the funding side in Europe. But the other thing, outside, when I say outside the organization, is the regulatory environment. Europe is very good at regulating, but it seems that this regulation has resulted in kind of an let's say, overly strict framework.
I get you. I get your drift there, and I think I agree with you. It definitely has a lot to do with the much slower take-up, the much more risk-averse take-up, because you need to do all these due diligences, etc. At the same time, regulation could be a driver at some point in the future, but in the meantime, it's a big brake on innovation, on the adoption of these technologies.
True.
So how do you see the evolution, challenges, and future outlook for the future of the Luxembourg startup ecosystem?
Well, see, Jérôme, I think Luxembourg has one big asset. We are one of the largest financial centers in the world. We should leverage the competences we have in this financial center to produce a much stronger funding ecosystem for long-term investments, either private equity or venture capital. The timing is perfect. Europe is now, let's say, at an inflection point where valuations are still fairly low. We see increasing demand of US capital for European investments because the US economy seems to be slowing down. It's an ideal moment to attract funding into Europe. But we need to build the ecosystem. We need to build the drive to attract those capitals. And one way, I think, Luxembourg could leverage its competences is to attract front offices for these private equity and venture capital firms into Luxembourg. And then Luxembourg would have a collateral positive impact from this financial ecosystem that we would build around long-term investments.
Very, very true. And how about researchers? Because I know you're also involved on that subject in the country for a long time. I don't know if you've seen some of the headlines, but there seems to be like 75% of researchers in the US are actually open to the idea to relocating to Asia or Europe because of the defunding of public research. So we're talking about, potentially attracting the brightest minds either back to Europe because they tend to be very European or Asian in many cases, or even local American citizens over here. What do you think of that opportunity for the country?
Well, yeah, it's another opportunity that is opening up right now. Of course, we should take advantage of that. As you said, I've been involved in the research ecosystem myself. I was on the board of the University of Luxembourg for 20 years and have been helped to shape, let's say, that ecosystem as well. And indeed, we need to continuously invest into research. It's, of course, through research that innovation is also nurtured and anchored also in this country. And we've seen recent evolutions that are very promising, like, for example, the announcement of the AI, let's say, sovereign AI lab that the university will do together with the support of Google. I think these are important steps. And there's a lot of potential indeed.
Yeah. And also, I think, with spin-offs, spin-offs are one of the 10 points of the government's 10 points to support the startup ecosystem that were just released last week. I think there's really an ambition there. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, let's say, actually making that happen in the sense that, okay, well, we have bright minds already doing research today. We could have more bright minds in the future if we can attract those talented researchers from the US. But if you look at the Stanford experience, for instance, there is really a culture of nurturing researcher with business people and putting them together and helping them take the road of spinning off their project and creating a company. Where do you think we stand here, and what can we do better, or what should we do that we're not doing today?
Well, again, it's a lot about incentives that we give to those researchers to spin off companies. We don't have a great track record in spinning off companies. Other places in Europe have better ones. I think of Switzerland, for example. They have a great track record.
The EPFM is quite amazing.
In Zurich and also in Lausanne. This is great. But you know, the difference with here is that they have built an ecosystem where students get engaged a lot earlier in the process of innovation and entrepreneurship. So there is a specific ecosystem that we need to build around training students for entrepreneurship, and then also again, build those incentives that you can actually be successful and build, your career based on starting up a company, and that's still something that we need to create.
It's I mean, talking with researchers, and we're actually working on spinning off a company from one of the research institutions, and it's going to be announced very soon, or maybe by the time this goes out, it will have been announced. And it's really about, I think, working also a lot on the culture and opening up the eyes and the aperture of what the researchers are seeing, and that it's a world of possibility, and it's actually the entrepreneurial journey is an exciting journey too.
Indeed.
Gérard, well, thank you for coming on the Scale Factor and sharing your insights with us. If you guys liked it, please share and stay tuned for more episodes.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.